Hi guys and welcome. We've got an update today on Project Espresso, the Wega commercial coffee machine, and I've finally managed to get a new heating element for it, which you see here. And this is just much like any heating element that you'll have seen for things like water tanks and even similar to the ones in the old-fashioned electric kettles. It's just a loop with electrical connectors that heats up and warms up your water. It fits into this tank over here, which has been drained. And down here it has the connectors which need to be unbolted, two large bolts that hold it into the tank. So I'm going to unbolt this, draw the whole unit out, replace it with this one, wire everything back together, then we're going to plug it in, fill the boiler up and see if it works. I'm going to use this ratchet to undo the two large bolts that hold the element into the boiler, and this is a 1/2 inch drive ratchet. And of course there are 3/8 and 1/4 inch drive available. But there's something a little bit special about this ratchet, and I just particularly wanted to show you this because look, it ratchets like a normal one, as you can see, but it also has this really cool little feature whereby when you've got it in place you can do this or this or this, and as you can see it still continues to ratchet, and it uses a push-through system so that you can tighten and loosen. And this particular ratchet is by a brand called Aster, which is very, very exceptionally good quality. This is workshop garage quality tools, and I will be doing a review on this ratchet and hopefully some other Aster and Satra tools in the future, so keep an eye out for that. And I think this thing's just great. Now obviously in this case you've got lots of swinging room, but can you imagine when you're in a tight spot inside an engine bay and you've got a nut loosened off and you can only move it like, you know, that kind of amount, like it often happens, as you'll know if you do your own mechanics. And if you've got the ability to just do that, you can imagine how much time that's going to save you. Down here on the table you can see the new element and the old element there next to it. I've taken off the PTFE seal, which I'm going to reuse on this one for the purposes of testing. I will be replacing that along with all of the relevant seals and washers and what have you when I rebuild the entire machine. But for the purposes of testing I'm just going to reuse this seal. You can see it doesn't actually look that bad. It's more discoloration from years and years of use, and at the back of it, apart from the discoloration in the insulating ceramic portions, it really doesn't look that bad. It's obviously just doesn't work, it's defective, so hopefully that is the only thing that's wrong with it, and this will do the job. We've got the new heating element in. It's wired up, it's nipped down tight but not too tight, and I've connected it up with the numbered connectors. I honestly don't think these three make a difference as long as each one goes to one of the coils, and then you've got a common earth, but I've numbered them so I make sure they all go back in the same place. Tighten them all up accordingly, make sure I've replugged this in. I'm going to double check that I've retightened the filler cap, or the blanking plug as it were, on the top that I used to empty it, to make sure that that's not going to steam up. And then I'm going to fill up the bottle and we'll plug it in and fill it full of water, check to make sure that it's not pouring water out, and then at that point I'm going to try and heat it up and see what happens. Everything's plugged in, I've checked everything's tightened up, we should be good to go. Over here you'll see I've got a milk jug which is full to the brim. It holds about 2.5 litres up to this line here, so that should be, the boiler's a 3 litre boiler, but it actually holds about 2.5 litres topped up. So I'm going to switch it on. What it should do after a second or two is start the pump. This is position 1, and it should fill the boiler up with water. So we've got a green light down there, which is the boiler empty warning light. You can see the water is now emptying out of the jug. And hopefully there's no drips there, so that's a good start. Okay, so I'll be back in a second once the boiler's full. Now, fingers crossed on this one, I'm going to switch it over to position 2, which is where it will auto refill and switch the power on. Obviously it shouldn't refill anymore because it's up to full, but this is where it will switch the heating element on, so hopefully it's not going to blow anything. So here we go. Okay. Not sure if anything is happening. I currently have no lights. Okay, so we're back in. I'm holding this because the washing machine's going and, well, as you can see, we have lights. What had happened is the fuse had blown, and I am hoping that the reason that the fuse had blown was, oh, I'm feeling warmth at the bottom of the boiler. I'm hoping that the reason that the fuse had blown was because I actually messed about with the level sensor. Yeah, we're definitely getting warm. There's no pops or bangs or horrible noises from the electrical supply area, which is always a good sign. I'm certainly no expert with electricity. I find it quite scary, to be honest, so I always try to be fairly careful with it. So yeah, that's warming up. I'm going to leave that to do its thing. And I can let go of that now, it's stopped rattling. I'm going to leave that to do its thing, and I will be back in just a moment once we are hopefully up to pressure. I'm just going to come in close and have a sort of close-up look at things. You can see the new element that's fastened in there, and obviously it's there's no way of you knowing, but feeling that you can actually feel that is indeed getting hot. Bear in mind that's 2.5 litres of water, and even though it's a 2900 watt heater, that's 2.5 litres of water that it's heating in a copper tank, so that's going to take a little while to get up to pressure. On the front we do have a pressure gauge. Unfortunately, as mentioned in the previous videos, the gauge is faulty. So it's got this needle, which I believe should be pointing down here, and this needle should be up here somewhere. I don't know if this is rebuildable or if this is something I will need to replace. That's a switch with its 2 positions, position 1, position 2. Position 1 fills the boiler only, position 2 is auto refill and the heater. This is your warning light, which flashes when the tank is empty, and then automatically refills and stays solid when it's full. And then obviously we've got the steam one there, which we will test in a moment, and the control panel for expressing the coffee. Oh, excellent, look at that. That's actually started pouring the water out. I'm going to let that pour a bit out. There's not a lot, it's not forcing it out at great pressure just now. It is indeed very hot indeed. I'm going to let that pour a bit out to see if I can drop the level and get it to refill. You can see that's building more pressure up now. Fantastic, so you can see the auto refill started. That will refill the boiler up to its maximum point. Apologies if the sound was bad on that previous clip there. I just realised I did not have my lav mic clipped onto me. This is the thermometer that I use for my photography. You'll see it's currently reading an ambient, well that's just because I've been holding it. The ambient is actually under 20, but it's reading about 20. So just so you can see, and this has been in the jug for a little while now, and that's the water that's just come out of the boiler. Let me stop that annoying rattling. And that's up near 90 degrees, and that's actually, in fact, just over 90 degrees. So yeah, as you can see, that is indeed throwing out very hot water. This part of the video is a continuation of the previous one. This is the following day. I was going to edit and upload this last night, but I wasn't happy with the bits that were showing the testing of the machine after the boiler had heated up, because I was losing the light fast, and the quality, as you can see here, is very poor because of the loss of light, and I didn't have any portable lighting to move into here. So what I'm going to do is refilm that. I'm going to reheat the boiler and everything and refilm that. You can see I've got the water over here, and then I'm going to show you again in better light the testing of the water dispenser, the group head, and the brew head, and the steam wand, to show you that in operation. And also last night what I did, another reason I wanted to film this, is while I was looking at it last night, I thought I'm going to take this apart and see if I can do anything with it, because I did mention, of course, that this was all sort of pointing in the wrong direction and not working, not moving anywhere. So I took it apart. It's actually a very simple construction inside. Mechanical gauge with a brass tube that's curled around with soldered end caps. Two lines that feed in for the boiler pressure and the brew pressure are thin copper lines that feed the high pressure water in. This in turn heats and expands the curled copper tube, moving it out, which moves in mechanical linkage, which turns a dial, which turns the needle. So I took it apart, took the pointer hands off, checked everything to make sure it was all free moving, and then tried sort of readjusting the little ratchet gear that drives these. So it's working. I'm not going to say I've fixed it, because although it's working, I'm not convinced it's reporting it entirely accurately. I don't think this one's far off the top one, because it cuts out at 1.2 bar, which is the very top of the green band of safe pressure, then goes into a black section, then you've got your, oh my god, switch it off quickly, this is the red section. And likewise on this one was way off, and I had to dismantle this because the ratchet had come away from the wheel completely, so this one was never going to register anything. So I've had to kind of dismantle it, refit the ratchet sort of roughly as to where it looks about right, and this I suspect is way off, because the bar pressure is reading somewhere between, it's sort of close to the 8, but it's definitely not going into the 9 bar, which is where your good extraction pressure is. I don't think it's that it's not pumping out enough pressure. I'm sure it's adequate. I think it's that I've not quite reassembled the gauge properly. Unfortunately, I didn't film any of that, but hopefully when I do the whole strip down to clean and check, I will take that apart again and just show you the innards of it for anyone who's interested. But what I'm going to do just now, switch it to position 1, see if it needs to suck up any more water. And we're looking good there, so the boiler must be full. This would flash and it would activate the pump if not. So I'm going to switch it to position 2, and this will start to heat up the boiler. So I'm going to leave that to heat up and then come back in a moment as this gauge starts to rise, so that you can see once it starts to boil and the pressure increases, you can see this needle begin to move. We're back at this point, and as you can see here, hopefully, the pressure gauge has started to rise. This has happened just after you hear the boiler actually start to boil and the steam valve starts hissing a little bit. It's like your pressure valve on a, as you can hear that there, that's like your pressure valve on a pressure cooker with a little pin which seals it. The pressure builds up, it pushes the pin up, seals it. This is like a blow-off valve, a safety thing. So just after that, the needle begins to rise. This is when it's feeding the hot air into the back of the gauge. You can actually feel, if you hold the little pipe, you can feel it's a bit warmer in there. And you'll see the gauge is rising up relatively quickly now, because the water's obviously already boiling. It's continuing to heat that until it's building up steam. The boiler is about 2/3 to 3/4 full of water with a gap at the top, which is where the steam is generated. And this needle will continue to rise up to about 1.2 bar, where it will cut off. That's just above the green section. But as I say, that's I suspect that this gauge is not 100% accurate. I'll probably end up replacing this with a replacement at some point in the future, but it's good enough for my needs for now. And there it's just clicked. That's the heating element clicking off, and you can hear it actually start to switch off like your kettle would. You can hear it going shh, and then when it clicks off, that noise stops, and that's the heating element stopping. Now if I run off some water, what that should do is drop the pressure and the level. It will start to pump in some water. You can see this is the pump pressure incidentally. You can see it's pumping in some more water now. As that water fills the boiler, the pressure in here will drop because the temperature will drop, and it will switch back on. And that's just clicked the heater back on, and it's starting to heat up again. Over here is the top of the boiler in all its disgusting glory. As you can see, this is prior to everything being stripped and cleaned. This is the valve I mentioned, which is like your pressure cooker relief valve, blow-off valve. This is where this is the bolt where you can drain the boiler. As explained earlier in the video, this is your level sensor. If you unplug this, it will start pumping the boiler full of water. This has a probe inside which detects the water level. This is the feed for the brew head. This is the feed for the steam one, which comes out of the top of the boiler, and then this is the feed for the hot water, which feeds down into the bottom of the boiler. So the steam pressure pushes the water, steam pressure bears down, pushes the water up through here and out of the hot water dispenser. That's the side of the boiler with the new heating element as mentioned, and there's a close-up of the gauge so you can see where that's at. It's, as I say, it's just about at the top of the green section there. Something else has just occurred to me, literally just this minute, that the pressure here, which is showing sort of between 5 and 8 bar on here and not going into the green section between 8 and 10, there's also a possibility that that might be due to the fact that I am taking the water feed currently from a stationary water tank, and this line is actually designed to plumb into a cold water supply, which is a pressurized feed. As you all know, anyone who's done any plumbing with your home taps will know that your cold water is pressurized, unlike the hot water, which is typically fed from a tank and is gravity feed. So that in itself might make the difference between that and that gauge. So before I mess about with anything else in this gauge, I will have to actually plumb it in and check it and see, because that might make the 1 bar or so difference that's required. So that's the heater clicking on and back off again, maintaining that temperature. What I'm going to do now is move this over here and show you the bits that I was going to show you yesterday, which I wasn't happy about with the lack of light. So we're going to show you the hot water dispensing, the group head. In fact, I'm going to do the group head just now so that you can actually see the pressure gauge swing out. And then the steam wand. The group head, I'm just going to show you now. This actually takes the feed. It will start the pump, and it takes cold water from your line feed, pumps it through the pump, up through the bottom of the boiler, up through a heat exchanger tube, and that passively heats the water with the hot water in the boiler, heating it up to an ideal brewing temperature for your espresso shot, which should be under boiling, of course. So I'm just going to do a double shot. I've not actually programmed these properly yet, but I'm just going to press one of these, and this will fire this up and start to do that. But keep an eye on that gauge, and you'll see that the pressure increases as soon as the pump starts. We'll just do that again. And as you can tell from that, I've not, that would normally be about 30 seconds. I've not programmed these in properly yet. But you can see there the pressure went to about 7 bar. So it's quite possible that with line pressure that might increase that. So I'm quite happy with that for the moment, and as I say, I might take the back off that just to show you the innards, but I'm not going to mess about with that again until I've got line pressure and see where that's at. So we know that that bit works. What I'm going to do now is get some cold water in this jug, and we're going to have a go at the steam wand and see how quickly that steams. So here in this jug, I have it filled up to the bottom of the pouring spout, which is about where you would put milk. You can see where it's frosted there from the cold of the cold water. It's about where you'd put the milk for this. This would be enough for a large double espresso in a jug this size, and would normally take well over a minute in the gadget, for example, just to give you an example of the difference we're looking for. This should be very, very quick on a machine like this. So I'm going to put this on here with the steam wand appropriately placed, and I'm going to get my stopwatch and we're going to time this so that was about 20 seconds, give or take my sort of cack-handed method of starting and stopping that, for enough for a large espresso, which, as you can see, is even quicker than the brewing of the shot would be at about 30 seconds. I'm going to do that again with some more cold water, but I'm going to heat it up to pretty much a rolling boil and see where that's at. So same as before, we'll get the stopwatch ready and that's just up to about a rolling boil and was about 29 seconds. So very, very fast steaming. As you can see, that's the difference between steaming on a home use machine. That would have been about 2 minutes on the Gadget with the tiny boiler that it has, and you can't brew and steam at the same time, which is something that you can do on a heat exchanger or a dual boiler machine. So am I impressed? I am. I'm very impressed. I'm very pleased that I've managed to get this gauge moving, even though it may not be 100% accurate. It will be good enough for my needs just now and will give me an indication of that's doing its thing. I'm really pleased about the heating element, especially because it was a very expensive part, but you don't mind paying the price for an expensive part if it does the job, and in this case it did, so I'm really delighted for that. So what's next for Project Espresso? The next step is to, we're going to switch this off for starters, and I'm going to leave that to cool down. I am going to get rid of the water out of the boiler, and then it's going to be a thorough, complete strip down and give everything a really good clean, and all of the boiler parts and the feed tubes and everything else are going to soak in a citric acid solution to descale everything and clean everything. And once it's all spotless and clean, I need to order a gasket set, which is, I don't know how much that's going to cost as yet, but I dare say it's not going to be very cheap, because none of these things tend to be. So I'm going to order a gasket set and rebuild it, replacing all of the gaskets in all of the pipework, the boiler, and basically everything that's pressurized, because it's daft trying to reuse stuff in a pressurized system if you know it's likely to cause you problems in a month's time or so, or even immediately as you start it up. And then after that, it will be a case of checking everything, make sure it works, flushing the whole system through, putting through a couple of seasoning shots, and then we'll be able to do a first test. So thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this, all of you coffee loving folk, and we will see you in the next video. So thanks for watching.